It was in 2008 that India's economy first took a knock with the worst ever global economic depression and its far-reaching consequences. Fast forward to 2012, and while the end of the world may not be quite here, the prognosis for the Indian economy looks bleak. An abysmally depreciating rupee, disappointing monsoons and outdated policies restricting investment. Indian marketers are a worried lot these days. But as strategists are busy prophesizing for the slowdown, a look at consumer behavior in India indicates the stark opposite. FMCG volume growths are at an all-time high, the retail industry boasts of consistent spends, and the entertainment sector has nothing to complain about if the box office is anything to go by. So, are overcautious marketers acting out for a crisis that hasn't hit yet, and are ignoring ground realities for boardroom forecasts in what could possibly be a self-fulfilling prophecy of the worst kind? Khushbu Patodia and Nikita Saxena figure this one out.
There's a storm coming, Mr. Wayne. Anne Hathaway's prophetic dialogue from the now iconic Dark Knight Rises is a warning worthy of an apocalypse. And if ever Indian economists, a flustered government, marketers and investors faced one, this national economic quandary would be it. A GDP growth rate that has tumbled down to 5.3%, a rupee suffering from a record depreciation of 26% since April 2011, adding to a dangerous inflation trajectory, an infamous downgrade in its credit ratings, and monsoons that are 22% below normal in a primarily agrarian economy. Add to this the imminent effect of deteriorating global economies, fiscal and trade deficits that have ballooned to 5.8% of the country's GDP, and India's crowning glory, its policy paralysis. The economic downturn seems to be here, and how. But as India Inc. is crying foul and every marketing pundit rushing to respond to the slowdown, are they jumping the gun? Have well-thought-of strategies and boardroom discussions inspired by pessimistic media gone far too ahead of the consumer? A consumer who is still optimistic, a consumer who is reaping the benefits of salary increments across industries, a consumer who is in fact saying through his consistent purchases, what downturn?
The current slowdown that everybody is speaking so much of, and there is so much anxiety around, I think certainly if you look at it from the manufacturer or the brand side, you can see numbers reflect that. But if you go from the other side and look at it from consumers and their sentiments, and you move outside, life has improved over the last few years. The experienced economy is not the same as the measured economy. The economy that we measure is done at an aggregate central level, and it reflects to a very large extent the concern of corporates. When the good news is good, you overreact to good news. When news is bad, you overreact to it. The sense of the fact that there will be business cycles, and you need to find a way to deal with business cycles without this kind of a knee-jerk reaction, to me is the biggest need. My fear is the fact that if anything, these reactions are becoming even more exaggerated.
From the marketer's point of view, at times we find it that slowdown, negativity, skepticism about demand growth trajectory, etc., becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Consumers don't decide about their well-being every quarter. Whether they are doing well or not, whether they are positive about their future or not, is something which has a much longer time span.
No, I think the slowdown that we are seeing right now is more about the investment slowdown, which is definitely a concern. There's not enough infrastructure projects taking place, and the kind of investment that is required for India to continue to grow at a faster rate. That slowdown is a problem. But when you think about consumption, there is no slowdown. In fact, almost all data are showing some very, very robust numbers in terms of the growth that most companies have done.
While the automobile industry, real estate and consumer durables seem to be taking the biggest hit out of the projected crisis, with a depreciating growth and a distinct drop in demand. The lackluster spends seem to be restricted to these sectors that mandate long-term investments. Case in point, the booming FMCG business in India has only grown by a good 28.3% and has nothing to worry about. Take for instance, HUL India's 9%, Dabur's 12% or Colgate's 11% volume growth. Consumers aren't holding back their purse strings when it comes to this sector, be it due to the inherent necessity of these goods or the small scale and amount of income invested in these quick buys.
The good news about India is that there are a lot of people, and even if they consume a little, it adds up to a lot, which is why we're actually seeing a double-digit growth in the results of most companies that have already been announced. The caution really comes from other factors which have yet to reveal themselves. So, for example, what will a subdued monsoon, what impact will that have on food prices going forward? I think it is really the wild swings that we were seeing of 20 and 30% growth that I am saying we have to be a little bit more cautious about.
In fact, one very interesting phenomenon on the consumption that we are seeing also is that the mid and the premium ends of the market have actually led the consumption growth. And that really speaks volume for the fact that if your brands are differentiated, you will grow well on volume front as well.
Amidst a sentiment of impending doom is the one phenomenon most marketers swear by: a definite and prospective dip in discretionary and luxury spends. Preconceived notions and the overzealous belief in marketing theories may just be proved wrong by good old consumerism yet again. While frugality is reflected in the shorter but more number of holidays, the spends on travel by a holiday-loving public remain consistent, as is reflected by a 25% growth in this sector for 2011-12.
We saw almost a growth of around 80% versus our Q1 of 2011 and 12. Today families are now opting for shorter holidays. Instead of taking a 15 days holiday, so now the families are opting for a holiday for 4 days or holiday for a week. But families want to spend now holidays at least, instead of once in a year, it has become twice in a year phenomena, or maybe thrice in a year phenomena. And also these long weekends are also playing a big role in converting these prospective travelers into actual travelers.
But if a family has made up their mind that husband and wife want to go to Europe for a 14-day holiday, they've gone on the 14-day holiday, but they have not probably spent on dining out extra or shopping for things that they could buy over here. So what we've noticed is that holidays continue to sell, but there's been a shift in discretionary spend. What we find is that there is a trend where now there are lots of families who are also taking domestic holiday. There's a large amount of business that goes to short haul destinations.
For a nation that adores its food with a passion paralleled only by a fanatic love for movies, both the food and beverage and entertainment sectors have only gained in an anticlimax of sorts to the big bad economic slowdown, recording growth figures of 11.2% post the dip of minus 3.3% in the recession of 0809 for F&B. Proving that every Indian family still loves a good hearty meal, be it to celebrate the small joys of life or get over the depression of a hard day's work. As the most inexpensive discretionary spend with the most value, the entertainment sector, comprising theatres and multiplexes, did not do too badly either, with a phenomenal 72.2% growth in the last 1 year.
We've not seen any degrowth. In fact, we are seeing a positive growth in consumer spending. On the contrary, we are seeing more and more people coming out to entertain themselves. I think simply because we are amongst the lowest price point in terms of discretionary spend. In fact, this is going to be our biggest year of growth in our own history, where we are adding about 70 to 80 new screens this year, moving to about 8 new markets.
Film industry or viewing film is more of a still an escapism from reality. So we would definitely people have in fact increased the budget. The net effect is that we are not affected by economic slowdown, and in fact if I compare this year with the last year, maybe we have done at least 20-30% better than the last year.
Our few verticals. One is obviously banqueting and catering. I think during slowdown people have more trainings because they want to make sure that their workforce is more ready to keep their customer with them. The other one is socials, which is weddings. I don't think India will ever stop spending on weddings. main 50-60% of our business is not seeing any sort of slowdown, actually seeing a growth. The restaurant and bar business, a little bit not as much growth as we would want.
And if you thought these sectors had it easy, retail is not far behind. A recovery from a 10.7% growth rate in 2008-2009 recessionary period to 13.8% in 2010-11 is only projected to grow at a healthy rate of 12% this year. Though the slew of recent sales and never-ending discounts may indicate a bearish set of apparel marketers, the upbeat sentiment amongst consumers would reflect the complete opposite. The fact that this may lead to a viciously self-perpetuating cycle with disastrous long-term consequences by breeding consumers who would expect constant appeasement through such offers is an opportunity cost these marketers need to think about.
In the apparel segment, at least what I believe, there has been absolutely no slowdown. Consumers are shopping. The summer season that started, let's say from February onwards, has seen good sales. The entire end of season sales that's happening right now has in fact seen good numbers. So it's an absolute myth, at least in apparel, that there's been any slowdown. Again, where marketeers are concerned, if one is a little prudent, at least in our industry, where we are prudent in terms of inventory holding, I don't think there can be any major problem. The issue with a lot of brands is when they overproduce or they're overconfident and the inventories take a hit. That's where brands have a challenge.
We are actually looking to expand in India. So we have absolutely no intention of slowing down. Business has, as I mentioned earlier, we've had a phenomenal growth in the last 6 years. The graph is only going north. Budgets are going up for everything. Budgets for buying in the boutiques have gone up many folds over. These are signs of sales.
In a scenario where every macro indicator possible is pointing towards a slowdown, marketers may be forgiven for thinking that the storm has indeed come. But one perspective has been ignored, if not altogether forgotten: the consumers. Ground realities seem to have been done away with, and one marketer's convincing rhetoric has become every marketer's perceived certainty, in a cascading effect where everyone is sure there's a slowdown without actually knowing why.
Absolutely, Nikita, and only time will tell if this pessimism will be converted to the truth merely because they want it to, or if brands are actually going to adapt to the consumers' demands and make hay while the sun still shines, with more segmented approaches, more courageous investments, and long-term anticipatory mechanisms to a possible slowdown that are not so defeatist.
On that note, it's time for a short breather, but coming up